Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Blood and Bones with your girl, Mandy Tang. And in today's episode, we are going to talk about something that requires a behavior shift. And this is on the topic of golden handcuffs. Okay, what do you do when you're in a job where you feel stuck because of the money or the perks or the stock or the equity that you're getting from that job? Okay. And then how that relates to this behavioral economics concept of loss aversion. So essentially, the fact that we as humans are wired to have more pain when it comes to losing something than the perspective pleasure when we gain something, and how all this relates to you feeling stuck in your job and not wanting to make big changes moving forward because of loss aversion. All right. So let me give some context of why this topic came up. On one of my TikToks recently, someone had commented, okay, but what about if you have golden handcuffs and you feel like I can't get that salary anywhere else? What do you do? Okay. So this is like one of these bugs that sat in my ear for a while. And I was like, that is a really good question, because I think that's something that a lot of people are going through. And I wanted to respond to that in a thoughtful and almost methodical way, because I was like, I keep hearing this over and over in different variations. So this person cannot be the only one who is basically afraid to make a move because they don't want to leave money on the table. Okay? How normal is that? Absolutely. I feel like everyone at some point in their life has gone through that. Okay. So I start researching this and I'm like, yeah, what is that? What is the golden handcuff effect? Right? And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term, so golden handcuffs is essentially where a company will incentivize you to stay, either through money or stock or perks or whatever they're going to give you. And this can sometimes even be systematized in a company where they'll be like, okay, if you stay a year, you get this amount of, like a 1 year bonus if you stay. If you stay 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, it's sometimes on a schedule. Okay. And they can call it a long-term incentive plan. This can be the stock that you'll be rewarded. This can be an upcoming event, such as, okay, well, we are getting ready to IPO and I have all these shares. And once we IPO, then I'm going to be able to trade it on the open market. And how amazing is that? Okay. So I started to think about this dynamic, and it's this dynamic of future gains versus present losses. Okay. And this can happen even on the micro level of saying, well, I want to leave, but now is not a good time because I need to stay until my bonus, right? Or I need to stay until, even as small as like, I need to stay until this project is done. Like, there's basically always going to be something, even if you're not some like tech person who has these incentives, right? Or if you work at some corporate company, if this doesn't apply to you, because it is sort of honestly a bit of a privileged stance as well, you can even think about this in terms of timing, the way that you might talk to yourself when it comes to, oh, I can't leave until ... right? So everybody has a version of this in their life. Okay. So there have been these economic studies where people have looked at what are the attitudes towards loss. Okay. And the example that is usually given is, hey, if you're walking down the street and you have $10 in your pocket and you lose it, that's going to hurt more. Like, you're going to feel that pain more than if you had no dollars in your pocket and you're walking down the street and you just found a $10 bill. Like, yeah, you'd get a zap of like joy, but the pain is going to be worse psychologically of losing something that you had rather than finding something that you didn't even know was an option. Like, oh, that's lovely, right? Okay. So as I'm researching this, you guys, and it's morning, by the way. I'm like trying this new thing where I'm like, okay, I know I'm going to do a podcast or a YouTube every Tuesday. So let me try to do it first thing. So my brain is already kind of like open and gooey and like almost in a dreamy state. I'm very suggestible at this time. This is usually when I do my writing, but I was like, let's just try to do it earlier in the day. Okay. So as I'm like reading through loss aversion, I get this feeling in my stomach and I say to myself, uh-oh, you're doing this right now. And I'm going to use this. This is going to be the analogy that we're going to use throughout this video, throughout this podcast, okay? Which is, I'm going to share with you my experience with my stock portfolio. Okay, so I started investing seriously probably about 5 years ago. All right? And we're not talking millions of dollars here. Guys, come on. I am a everyday investor. I automatically take money out of my bank account every month, and it's not a huge amount, okay? But I put it into 2 accounts. I have an E-Trade account, and then I have a Merrill Lynch account, which essentially serves as my SEP IRA because I'm a small business owner, okay? Because years ago, I was like kicking myself because I was like, why? Ugh, like you never did the corporate thing long enough to have a sizable 401k. Like you're missing out. It was basically FOMO. I was like, you got to get your shit together. And so I just researched it and was like, what do small business owners do if they don't have 401k? And I found this very similar financial instrument called a SEP IRA. It's free. Okay. I set it up so that basically it's a long-term investment account. It comes out of my funds that it's like part of my business, right? But it's essentially a 401k. All right, so I have my personal kind of E-Trade fund stocks that I invest in, and then I have my long-term money that I basically cannot touch until I believe it's like until I'm 62 or something like that, okay? Those are my 2 investment vehicles. Now, I am someone, if you don't know, who really believes in financial literacy, financial empowerment. I think especially as a woman, it is imperative that we educate ourselves. And guys, stocks are fun. Stocks are easy. I have so many little analogies that I use in my brain. I tell all my friends, I'm always like, do you know how to shop at TJ Maxx? And they're like, yeah, of course. What are you even talking about? I'm like, then you know how to invest. Because it's all about knowing the value of something and then paying a certain price for it and then just waiting for that value to grow. Okay, so if you're at TJ Maxx and you find a Prada bag for $80, you're going to buy it. Because you're going to be like, oh my God, this Prada bag is worth like $1,000, right? So I feel like as women, because we understand brands, because we understand the value of things, because we understand the relational value of brands and their long-lasting nature over time, I believe that we are actually very well positioned to understand stocks and to understand how to buy them and all of that. Okay, so yeah, about 5 years ago, I really educated myself. I didn't spend a dime, guys. I just borrowed books from the library. There is a great book called Invested by Danielle Town that breaks it down. And every part of my education was free. I don't think you should have to pay anything. This is all just go to your local library, borrow some books, start reading about how to invest, watch some YouTube videos. Like it's all out there. It's all free. Okay. So I basically think that I am sitting high on the hog. I'm like, I'm doing great. I have a portfolio. I have my SEP IRA, like I'm doing great. Then I read this shit about loss aversion, and I'm like, oh God. Okay. Because when you're in your E-Trade account and you're looking at your portfolio, you can essentially filter it. You can filter the order with which you see your stocks. So let's say you have 20 stocks. Okay. And I'm not like a sophisticated, like I'm not fancy. My stocks are like Microsoft, Apple, Google, it's there's nothing on there that you haven't really heard of. I mean, PayPal, Marriott, Amex, like brands. Okay, that's what I invest in. Sorry, I'm like a basic girl, okay? So you can look at them alphabetically. You can look at them by the share value. You can look at them by how much money you've gained or lost. Okay, and a gain or loss is really simple. It's essentially, let's say in January you buy a stock for $20, and now the price of that stock is $50. So if you were to sell that stock today, you would have made $30. Okay, so that is called an unrealized gain or loss, which is essentially like comparing what you paid for it versus what it's being sold for today, how much you would gain or lose. Okay, so that's a column in the spreadsheet, and you can sort by gain or loss. I'm going to say that 80%, 90% of my portfolio is like all gains. Okay, and it's not huge, but it's like, yeah, when you bought Costco stock 2 years ago, actually Costco has gone insane. Costco stock 2 years ago, I bought it at like 200 something. Now that stock is at $700, right? But you can also sort by loss. I'm going to use one stock in particular to explain this concept, and I'm going to use Zoom. Okay? Remember Zoom, guys? I mean, we still use it every day. But I had bought probably 5 or 6 shares of Zoom right before the pandemic, and I'll tell you why. It's so simple. There were 2 things that happened. One is that I was working on this virtual conference, and the person who was co-organizing it was using Zoom. And I'd never heard of it before, but I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then 2, when I was at the airport, there was a huge billboard for Zoom. And so in my brain, I was just like, oh, Zoom is like, I've seen it multiple places. It's kind of becoming a thing. When I used it for that virtual conference, I kind of liked it. So I was like, you know what? Let me take a bet on this. Let me just buy like 5 or 6 shares. Okay. Let's say I bought 6 shares at $60. It's $360. So I was like, all right, let's just play with it, see what happens. Then the pandemic hits, and this shit goes through the roof. I mean, it just goes banana land. Okay. The shares go up to $400 a share. And I am sitting pretty. I am like, oh my God, I'm the smartest person in the whole world. Blah, blah, blah. Like, I am amazing. Okay. So I continued to buy. And as it was going up, I continued to buy. Okay. Of course, it peaked in about 2021. And then 2022, 2023, it started to come down. Okay. It started to come down. And I'm just looking at my little sheet right now. Right now, it's at $70.73. And there were times in there where I was buying at $150, $160, right? So I basically lost a bunch of money. I lost a bunch of money. And I was like, ugh, that kills me. But you know what? Loss aversion alert. I didn't do anything about it. I just let it sit there, and I just let it keep losing a little bit more money every single month. And so this occurs to me. I'm researching for this podcast today, and I'm like, oh no, I'm doing it. Oh no. And okay, you're going to maybe think I'm silly, but I subscribe to the Warren Buffett philosophy of long-term investing. And one of those principles is that you basically buy and hold. You buy and hold. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that is what I've just been doing. I actually have never sold a stock. You might laugh at me. I don't know. I just kept holding. But then I read this thing on loss aversion where it was like, the pain of losing is psychologically twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then I thought this other thing, which is I've been cleaning out my house lately. Okay. And I feel that this is actually directly related to clutter mind. Okay. So I'm cleaning out my drawers because I realize I'm a minimalist. Like I literally wear this t-shirt, the same sweatpants, the same sweatshirt every single day. Okay. I have like a uniform of like 4 pieces of clothing and everything else. Like I just don't wear. I mean, given my lifestyle, I mean, I'm not going out to like a fancy dinner at a French restaurant. Like it's just not happening. But yet I have all these clothes from like a bygone era where I used to do that kind of thing. I used to live in New York City and we used to like go out and I just don't do that anymore. Okay. But those clothes were just still taking up space in my drawers. Okay. So I would pull out, and I'm all about Marie Kondo's spark joy. Okay. So I'm pulling out piece by piece and I'm like, it does not spark joy. It does not spark joy. But once in a while, it'd be like, oh, but this is like a joie shirt that I got at Bloomingdale's. I remember when I bought it and I paid just like $120 for this shirt. And like it, we remember everything. And so I was like, no, I can't get rid of it. I can't get rid of it. I put it back in the drawer. And this is the clutter mindset, right? This is actually the same loss aversion mindset where you're like, no, I don't want to get rid of it because then that also signals, and here's the important part, it signals a psychological defeat in that you're admitting you made a mistake and that you're admitting that you're throwing money away. Okay, and anyone from an immigrant household, anyone from parents who were really into saving and being very, I don't know, stingy is it's not stingy though. It's scarcity mindset. It's scarcity mindset. You wouldn't believe the number of plastic bags, plastic containers, every kind of thing. Like my parents can't throw stuff away. Okay, but I'm looking at my drawers and I'm like, there's no space. There's no space for me to, like, where am I going to put my sweatpants? My sweatpants need a home. I've got way more sweatpants, than nice clothes, and I wear sweatpants. So where are they going to go? And so again, this is loss aversion. It's the same thing. So eventually I got a big plastic bag and I went through drawer by drawer and I pulled that shit out and I just put it in the bag and I was just like, nope, because I could widen my perspective and I could see that I'm going to value the space more than I'm going to value this past poor decision that I made. And it's not always a past poor decision. I mean, like I loved that cute blouse. It's just no longer, I don't wear it anymore. And so getting rid of it is making space for things that I do wear. So then back to my stock market example. So at this point, I have 10 shares of Zoom. 10 shares of Zoom. And I think on average, I'd paid $150 for them, right? But the price now was only $70. But you know what I did? Do you know what I did this morning? I sold that because logically, I had my entire stock portfolio on the page. So suddenly it clicked that, oh, if I sell these 10 shares, even though it is a loss and that's painful, I can immediately then, let's say I sell the 10 shares for $700. Oof, that's painful because that represents also like an $800 loss. Oh my God. Think about how many groceries I could buy with that. That's real money, right? But let bygones be bygones because I realized, no, but today, if I sell that, then I stop the bleeding and I can immediately take that money and go buy more stocks. And you know what? I can actually just look at the stocks that are consistently performing well over the course of the past 5 years. And in fact, I can look at the entire lifetime of their stock performance and I can make better bets. So that's exactly what I did. I cleaned my closets and I cleaned my stock portfolio. Let me tell you some of the other stocks, some of the other loser stocks that I sold. This is not financial advice. I'm just sharing stuff with you guys. Okay. I had 2 shares of Wayfair. Sold that. I had shares of a company called Fastly, which had lost a significant amount of value. It's because way back when I worked at a company where Fastly was one of the clients. And so I just got exposed to them and was like, oh, I'll buy some shares of that. Total dud. No, didn't work. Okay. I basically got rid of 5 or 6 different low performing stocks. And guess what? I pooled all that money and immediately put that money into stocks that are actually performing well. Okay. So how do we put this into the context of the original question around golden handcuffs? Okay. Now, if we were to make an analogy with the stocks, what I would say is the golden handcuff is you're holding on tightly to Zoom, but you don't actually have any other stocks. So you know it's a loss and you know that you're losing, but that's your only job. So like, what else are you going to do? Okay. So what can we learn from this? What we can learn is you have to have an additional portfolio. So the only reason that I was so comfortable selling Zoom was because I was like, well, Jesus, I mean, I could take that money and I could put it into Apple. I could take that money and I could put it into VGT. I could take that money. I could see very clearly what my other options were. I could from the get just be like, oh, this is a no-brainer because yes, I'm quote unquote losing money, but why don't we just stop it now and move it from A to B? You know, that's what I did. And I think the problem is when you're in that toxic job, stressful job, golden handcuff job, you're at A, but you don't even see a B. And so what I would say is you have to start exploring what those other options are so that you have a place or you have, like, it'll minimize the pain if you know that there's something else you can go to. Right? So right now you're so stuck and frozen because you're like, well, yeah, I could get rid of this golden handcuffs, but then where am I going to go? Okay. My point is everything requires, like, you're going to experience a loss. Okay. Just like I literally lost so much money from this stupid Zoom investment. Right. But because I had other shit going on and because I could see, oh, I could just move my effort from this bucket to that bucket and it'll minimize the pain. Like the pain never goes away, but if you can have systems to be like, well, at least I could go do this other thing, then I think that really helps you. Okay. The last thing that I'm going to say on this topic is the idea that the beauty of the stock market and the beauty of all of this is that I was able to open up and objectively see how poorly Zoom had been performing. There's no argument. You open that up, you see, starting 2022, dropping. Okay? Even with that, guys, it took me this long to finally sell it. So I'm just acknowledging how difficult that process can be. However, this is why it's so important to have a record of how you feel. Okay? Because the thing with the Zoom stock is that I had indisputable evidence of its poor performance. And that's the case that I want you to build for yourself as well. Which is, how can you create a case where you see indisputable evidence that it is in fact not a good fit for you, that it is in fact not the right place for you to be, that there are in fact a dozen other better performing places that you could go, that you might feel more welcomed, that you might feel less alone, that you might feel just not so stressed. right? And that's where, so you're like, well, how do I make a record of this? How do I do that? Well, you write it down. You write it down, just like I could be like, okay, show me every single day snapshot of Zoom performance. And it's just like this sad downward arrow. I mean, I never hit sell faster in my life. I was just like, F this. I'm over it. I don't want to do this anymore. You know what I mean? And now what's happened is I can look at my portfolio and it's like I've cleaned out the junk. Does that make sense? And this is like, I'm going to be open. I'm going to be flexible. I'm going to forgive myself, because it's also like, well, that was for early days. I was just playing. I was learning how to invest. And this is how you learn, I think, is you got to lose something, but it's also like, then you got to know when it's time to sell and move on and use those proceeds. See, here's the other thing. I did not take those proceeds and put it in my pocket and buy a handbag. I didn't do that. I took those proceeds and I right away reinvested it in things that were actually going to continue to perform for me. Okay? So you need to have a physical record of your experience so that you can, like the stock market, look at it with plain and objective eyes and be like, April 1st, how do I feel? May 1st, how do I feel? June 1st, how do I feel? July 1st, how do I feel? And friends, if every single month the stock price is getting lower and lower and lower and lower, it does not look like Zoom's not coming back, guys. And even if it did, okay, well, then I made another mistake, number 2. But the other thing is, even if it did come back, do I care? Because I got my money out, some of it, what I could salvage, I got some of it out, and I put it towards things that I think are going to work based on evidence. Okay? So build that evidence, and just understand that this loss aversion is also very closely related to scarcity mindset. And I say that because, so I have parents who grew up during the Cultural Revolution in China, and it was a time of great upheaval. They have experienced uprooting themselves, moving from Hong Kong to the US. A lot of Chinese immigrants made this Chinese, Taiwanese, Cantonese, made this move around the same time in the 80s, because when it was announced that Hong Kong was going to be returned to China, a lot of young professionals, people with young families, were freaked out because this was communist China that was going to be taking over again, and they fled. Okay, and it wasn't. I mean, it to put it into context, it wasn't like the same sort of fleeing that happened, say, in Vietnam after the war, okay? My parents were not refugees, all right? I'm not going to say that. But they are experienced in leaving everything behind, starting over. And there is a bit of this fear, scarcity mindset that just lives in them. Okay. So my mom comes to visit, and I noticed in my closet, in my pantry, that there's all these packets. Any restaurant that we'd go to, there's a peanut butter packet, there's a jelly packet, there's ketchup, there's mustard, there's mayo. My dad loves to hoard napkins, so he'll go to airports, fast food places, he'll grab a stack of napkins. There's just napkins everywhere. There's jelly everywhere. There's mayonnaise, just packet after packet of mayonnaise in my pantry. And I don't have the heart to have a, Mom, why is there jelly? Like, I understand why there's jelly, because somewhere deep in her primal brain, she believes that at any moment we're going to have to up and leave. And then what if we don't have jelly? So we'd better get jelly now. Okay. And so her refrigerator is very different from my refrigerator. My refrigerator, I like to clean it out once a week. It's not perfect, trust me. It's a hot mess in there, obviously. But I try, and if things are expired, I just throw them in the trash, Same with Tupperware. Like if there's a takeout container, like a plastic container, I'm like, I already have my good Tupperware. I don't need to hoard this, and so I recycle it, right? No, my mom is very loyal to all of her ketchup packets. You could find a ketchup packet from 6 years ago. You could find a ketchup packet from the time that I bought the Zoom stock is when she kept that ketchup packet. And she's also a part of the Charlie Munger school of long-term investing. Like, she will never let go. She will never let go. So I say this to say loss aversion, scarcity mindset, fear of not having enough, fear of losing something, fear of making the wrong decision. Ultimately, psychologically, it is us confronting our fear that we will have made a bad decision. And maybe if we hold on to it, then we don't have to experience that deep sadness that comes with realizing that you're wasting money, or that you're losing money, or that you don't really have a good grasp on everything, and sometimes you mess up. And that really is the core of what all of this is about, right? It's not about stocks. It's not about clothing. It's not about ketchup packets. It's not about golden handcuffs. It's just about admitting to ourselves that we are not that smart and we are not that strong. And sometimes we make stupid mistakes, life-altering level, bad decision mistakes. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't wake up and today be like, well, yeah, okay, I made 6 years of bad mistakes by staying at this company too long, but we're not going to make it 7 years. It's not going to be 7. I'd rather just keep it at 6. Do you know what I mean? So, all right. Gosh, after this, I have a huge urge to just throw away everything I own. We don't have to be so crazy. It's okay. It's okay. I do have very strong minimalist tendencies as well, to the point where sometimes I want to live like a monk lifestyle, and I just God, there's just too much stuff, But then I go back and forth because sometimes you need stuff. So, yeah, sometimes my husband is like, yeah, but don't throw that away without telling the kids. I'm like, okay. So, all right. Well, thank you guys for listening and watching. And I hope this is helpful. At the very least, clean out your cupboard, clean out your drawers. At the very most, at the middle tier, clean out your stock portfolio. At the most extreme, quit that golden handcuff job. Okay. Have a good week. Bye.